Hi everyone. Our last video got a lot of great questions, so let's bring those questions and their answers here for everyone's benefit. Thanks so much for being curious and for wanting to learn more about this process. Our first question. In college applications and the Common App, are team awards considered or do only individual awards matter? I would say both team and individual awards are considered and do matter to a student's application. What I see with each of those is that a student is able to accomplish the goals that are set in front of them. With team awards, that tells me they're able to work with their peers and work with others to accomplish that goal. Individually, it tells me that a student is able to, either define goals for themselves or pursue goals that are set for them and build an approach to make that happen. I like seeing students that are able to have both team awards as well as individual awards. Too much of one makes me ask what they might look like in a different context. I would obviously share any awards that you have because they're well deserved in either of those contexts. Don't feel as though one doesn't even matter in comparison to the other. It's very much something that as a reader, I would want to see what a student has been able to accomplish and learn a little bit more about the student from what that award is telling me. Here is our next question. If a student hypothetically fails the AP Calculus BC exam, but passes the AB section offered at their school, and later takes a college-level Calculus 2 course to make up for the BC, how would that be viewed? As you look at taking a Calculus 2 class for something at the college level, I always encourage students to make sure they are doing well in the coursework that is available to them at their high school first, before trying to pursue outside grades. It obviously shows you well in mathematics, specifically if you're taking college level coursework in high school. If you're not getting strong scores, so let's say you're getting B's or even C's in other courses, but getting really strong grades and showing a lot of advancement in math, that's a really imbalanced academic profile and one that would give me a bit of pause. I would encourage this student as well, don't feel the need to make up ground or catch up on lost time. We can't change a test score that's behind us, so just focus on what's ahead of you and doing your best. Next question. I faced a significant issue that affected my freshman year grades and overall GPA. Will that be considered in my application? This is an excellent question, as it's really something I feel gets forgotten a lot in the conversation around college applications. Life happens, and readers, evaluators, college admission staff are aware of that. So they're not going to be heartless when it comes to those types of considerations. The thoughts I have in response to this question would be, one thing a student should look to do in their additional information section of their common application or whatever program or platform they're looking to use. One thing they should look to include in their college application is an answer to that. It provides context. It gives a reader a sense of awareness of this was an event or series of events happening in my life, and helps frame the grades or other details around that time of the student's resume in a little bit more light. The other thought I would include would be, given that this was something that took place freshman year, don't feel as though you're too far behind to catch up. There's a lot of time between grade 9 and when you're actually submitting in grade 12. So do your best to, again, really go after what's in front of you and do your best in the school setting here. But don't feel as though a stumble that happened early on in your career is going to hold you back through the time of you submitting a college application. And I hope all is well after that freshman year issue that you're sharing with us. Next question. Do students need to outperform their peers, or is it sufficient for them to perform well enough to show potential for success at your institution? I like this question, and I feel it almost answers itself in the way that it's asked. Specifically, the student's aware of the idea that showing potential is what we as readers are most looking for. And to answer your question, if a student is outperforming their peers at the high school level, clearly that's showing the possibility of them doing well in a different, more rigorous environment. So that's why outperformance of peers is something that's considered. I would challenge the student's use of the word need here, as nothing's ever explicitly needed. Outperforming their peers does show potential, but there are many other ways to show potential elsewhere on your application. Don't feel the need to say that has to be the case for you in order to get into the university that you're looking to do. Showing potential can come through many ways in an application, so don't feel that the only way to show potential is by outperforming your peers. Next question. If a student does not seem to meet the academic standards, will you still review the rest of their application? This is a common question, and it's one that I'll offer a bit of insight to. Understand that when a reader or an evaluator is looking over a student's application, what they're assessing is fit. It's not this explicit grade, but we're trying to understand, could the student succeed in the environment of this university? So if an evaluator is able to assess a student is not going to meet that expectations, they would likely struggle or fail to keep up with the pace of the university. Most often, the reader will still look at the other material, but especially if a student's like miles away or pretty far away from the expectations that school has, there may not be as deep of a review, but it'll likely still get looked at just in case there's missing context or missing factors that the reader wasn't aware of. When it comes to a student who's right on that threshold of whatever the university is looking at, right in that pocket, then very likely there's going to be a deeper read to make sure that maybe there's other areas of the application where the student shows strong potential. And so that would get them over the hump, so to speak, and get them into consideration. Don't feel as though it's a black and white process. It is not an immediate stamp of disapproval. However, sometimes fit can be deemed pretty quickly based on the student's academic performance. So sometimes those reads will go quicker just because they're able to assess the fit for that student that much faster. Does attending a highly ranked high school hurt or help a student's chances? I would encourage whoever's asking this not to think of it as an A or B in classic fashion. It is some ways I feel a bit of both. If you're attending a highly ranked high school or any sort of academic institution that was prestiged or something that carries a lot of recognition, what I hear and think of when I see that is this school has a lot of resources for students. We continually see students succeeding based on the curriculum, the teaching, the programming of the high school. There's many different things that go into a school being very highly ranked. That obviously helps a student. Having access to those, being able to utilize all the different things that I just mentioned is going to benefit a student in their performance over time. The way it could detriment them or hold them back is if a student has all of these things available to them and doesn't really do much with it. That's always tough to see if we feel like a student is in an environment where a lot of people are able to succeed and they're not necessarily failing, but at least just getting by and not really pushing themselves or just meeting expectations versus going above and beyond. That's a way I feel it might hold back a student's application. But the simple answer here is that regardless of the style of high school you go to, as long as you're taking advantage of and really pushing yourself to be the best student you can be, that's going to be reflected on your application. So I would just encourage you to do just that. Push yourself and be the best student you can be. Would a student with a 3.5 GPA going to a college prep school be weighted more than a student with a 3.5 GPA that's going to a public school? I'm having a hard time understanding how college prep schools may help better someone's chances into getting into a good college. I'd rather not digest and really dive into college prep and more so focus on this idea of a 3.5 GPA or any GPA for that matter being different when looked at in separate contexts. To offer examples, if a student is receiving a 3.5 GPA, but I'm to learn that actually that's the highest score that any student in their class is receiving, and by a long shot, that tells me that students going above and beyond in the classroom in comparison to their peers, they're really standing out with the resources available to them. It's a bit of an extreme example, but it still tells me information that is positive to the student. Meanwhile, on the opposite end of that, if I learn that a student is receiving a 3.5, but most of the other students at school are getting, say, a 3.8 or a 3.85. Suddenly I'm wondering why that student isn't seeing the same success that other students are having. We don't want to spend too much time comparing ourselves against our peers, but we want to bring the best grades forward that we can. As I mentioned, the thought here with our grade point averages is it depends on the context of a school and how students broadly are performing. As is the case with a lot of our academic performance, we want to just be doing the best we can. Ideally, we're just pushing for the strongest number possible and letting that result speak for itself. Let's not work too hard about context and these details. We can have a much longer discussion about why does this grade look different in one school and what that school could look like versus another. But really what I see from this question is the thought of bringing our strongest grades forward and taking advantage of the resources that our school has and the coursework our school has. If you're interested in college preparation schools, that would be a great conversation to have with your family and loved ones. But for the sake of college admissions, just know that we're going to be thinking about the context a student exists in academically and reading from that. You as a student should be doing what's best for you, whether that's at your current school or if you have the option for other schools. Something to think about, but I'll leave it there for today. I'm applying for computer science to a lot of top schools this year, but to be honest, I don't have much to write in the why major essays. I like coding and I like solving problems, but I feel like that's just very cookie cutter and would in no way help me stand out. I've talked to some other people in CS who wrote about struggles in their lives, like family health issues, and how they tied that into their interest in pursuing computer science. But obviously, if I don't have those types of experiences, I don't know what to write about. Do you have any tips on this? What an awesome question. I'm so glad that someone spoke to this because essay writing and choosing topics for essays is one of my favorite parts about working with students in this process. To the student, I would say don't feel as though your story is just cookie cutter. Typically, that means we haven't dug deep enough and really found a story or a topic that is meaningful for you and is unique to you. There's always an answer there. And another area where we want to be a little bit cautious of comparing ourselves to others. I tend to push back against the idea that students in high school who have had really heavy, weighty family experiences or just life experiences at their age are sort of at an advantage because of that. We obviously want to be thoughtful and empathetic towards those people, and that may be a story that they choose to share. It also may not be the case that they share that. As is the case with all college applications, it's less about the topic that is chosen and more so about how that student talks about that topic and the learning that student shares from that experience. That's one of the reasons why it's a very common essay prompt, regardless of institution, and why we see it so often in our statements, the idea of overcoming a challenge in life. So to the student trying to figure out what their essay could be, you mentioned liking coding and solving problems. I would want to start there and dive a bit deeper. What about the problem solving really draws you in? Were there specific moments when you were problem solving where you felt it click in a really natural way? Was that experience meaningful for you? Has that inspired you to be where you are now and pursue the choice of applying to computer science? Or in terms of coding, what about coding do you like? Do you like the language aspect? Do you like the utility aspect? There's a much deeper vein to explore with those. So I'd really encourage you to go there. And again, what's the learning you take away from that? I want to see the maturity and thought and reflection that you're offering to me, the reader. And I also want to see where that inspiration for you comes from and why it leads you to where you are today. Another way of thinking of it is presenting a case. If you build a really compelling case of here's this life experience, this is what it taught me, here's this other life experience, and here's what it taught me. Based on these lessons, this university is the answer and why I'm choosing to make this choice. If you make a really compelling argument and support it with evidence, it's pretty easy for me to join in your thinking. That's one way of thinking of it, of which there are many, but I wish you the best with the essay that you're going to be writing. Does legacy matter? This is a tough question to answer. as I feel the answer is it depends. Depending on the institution, legacy can mean something or nothing at all. Some institutions do put weight towards the idea of a student being connected to either family members or having some connection to the university in some way. Other institutions are phasing out that idea. Personally, I think their legacy represents something else in most cases. If a student had two parents who both went to the same school and that's actually how they met each other and they've gone to every homecoming since whatever age, that type of story isn't really legacy focused. It's more so focused on the connection that they have to that campus and that campus's culture. That carries a little bit less weight in terms of just the sheer status of alum. Again, it's this idea of I connect, I understand this place more than I do others based on the house that I grew up in. Don't feel as though it's going to be an automatic VIP pass to the front of the line by any means. If you are in some way connected to a university through family or through other means, it's absolutely worth mentioning.